So this lecture is on Kant Part 2, and we'll cover the categorical imperative. And there are three versions of it, but we're going to talk about two versions of it: the kingdom of ends, or the principle of ends, and the universal law formulation. Okay. So the categorical imperative, remember the goodwill, right? The goodwill chooses the moral duty for the sake of duty, not for any consequences, right? And we ask, well, but what is one's duty? Well, we know that it's the rational thing that we would do, that reason would tell us to respect the moral law, and we would try to figure it out. But like, what exactly will reason help figure out? And for this is what Kant is doing. He says the good will choose duty. What's duty? We want to figure out what's the duty-bound thing to do. And that's the categorical imperative. Well, okay, what does that mean? Well, let's break it down. We first want to figure out what is an imperative. An imperative is just a command. So there are different kinds of imperatives. So there's the hypothetical imperative. And this kind of imperative is telling you to do something in a hypothetical situation, right? So consider this, right? If you are in circumstance C, or you want D or desire D, then do A. That is, it's a means to end. So, for example, if you want coffee, right? I desire coffee. Then go to the cafe, right? Is it telling you that you should go to the cafe no matter what? No, it's telling you that if you want coffee, then go to the cafe, right? If you are tired, then you should go to sleep, right? So notice that it's a conditional because it's talking about a hypothetical imperative. And it's also if you want a goal, right? If you want to get a good job, then you should probably, learn a skill or go to college or blah, 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 right? If you want to, get healthy, then you should watch what you eat and you should exercise, right? So it's not telling you should exercise it or watch what you eat. It's saying if you want something, right? Now that's in stark contrast with a categorical imperative, where the categorical imperative simply states that you must do this thing, right? It doesn't matter who you are, what the situation is, or what goals or purposes you have, whether you want to get a good job or a bad job, whether you want to, be healthy or unhealthy, whatever. The categorical imperative holds universally for all. And that's what the duty will be. So there are three versions of the categorical imperative. And Kant, in principle, thought that all three would kind of, say the same thing. And the first is the formula of universal law, or the universal law formulation. I'll say it in both ways. And only act in accordance with the maxim if you can at the same time will it as universal law. And you're like, what does that mean? Okay, we're going to get to that. But let's tackle an easier one first, and that's the formula of humanity. And that's only act so that you use humanity, whether in yourself or another, as an end in itself and never as a means. We'll cover that shortly. And the formula of autonomy is only act in accordance with the maxims that would be enacted into law by a legislator and member or citizen of a realm of events. Now, we're going to skip this part. We're going to discuss B and A. Let's start with the formula of humanity first, or the principle of ends. That's what our textbook calls it. And that is, act so as to treat every person affected, including yourself, as an end, never as a means. Now, what does a means and ends mean? A means is that you're not valued for your own sake, but rather because they are useful for attaining some valued end, right? That don't use people. That's the basic idea, right? Where you're using people not because they're you're using them for something, right? Right. Like, so I'm being nice to you not because human beings are, should be treated nicely, but rather because I'm nice to you because you can get me, something, right? An end is a thing that is valued for its own sake, and Kant only uses things that could have a goodwill, and those are true moral ends. So people or human beings that can have the goodwill or have the faculty, right, of choosing, can be treated as ends. So like carrots cannot be treated as ends because they cannot have a goodwill, right? Okay, so what if I use someone as a means but it has good results, right? That's not gonna work, right? Remember, you can't use people, right? You can't use consequences to inform the goodness of an action. So let's say, for example, let's say like I'm on a date with, Cindy, right? And Cindy, I totally think she's amazing, and I think I'll tell you the truth, I did a little bit of Facebook stalking on Cindy, and turns out that she's like totally into helping people, and so I'm like, okay, like I gotta impress her. This is our first date, and so we're in the car, and we're driving to a place where we're gonna hang out or have dinner or whatever, and right when we stop, there's like this elderly woman who's like has some groceries, and you can tell that she's struggling to get across the street. So when I say, hey, you know what, Cindy, can you hold on for a sec? I think I just want to help this lady out. So I park the car, I help the grandma cross the street, and she thanks me, and I get back in the car, and Cindy is impressed, right? Now, was that a good thing to help the grandmother? Was it a bad thing of course not. But what did I do? Did I treat the grandma as a means or as an end? I treated her as a means, right? A means to impress Cindy. I didn't treat the grandma as a person who has autonomy, person that has a will, someone, right? I just saw her and used her, right? Even though it had good results. So notice, in Kant, what's important is not just the results. Actually, the results don't inform goodness. Motive and intention are important. So, it is not wrong to treat persons as means. What's wrong is to treat persons only as means, right? So this is now a little bit more specific. So if I treated the grandma as an end in and of herself, and it also impressed Cindy, that might be okay. But if I only treated the grandma as a means to impress my date Cindy, then that would not be good. That's not right. Now, Kant allows treating a person both as a means to end at the same time, like the grandma example, but how about cases like a bus driver, right? When I'm taking the bus, I'm kind of using the bus driver, right? So, is that wrong? I mean, do I have to also see the bus driver as like an end in and of himself or herself, right? So let's kind of let that linger a little bit, right? The other thing, you always have to treat oneself as an end, right? So you can't see yourself as a means, so you have to have a high view of the self, right? So treating a person as an end involves respecting the person's autonomy. Okay. So acting to undermine or destroy a person's autonomy fails to value that person as an end and is morally wrong. So the minute you are using someone and that person is not seen or viewed as an end, that's morally wrong. So that's the principle of ends, or formula of humanity, right? So that is a version of the categorical imperative, right? It's not three different categorical imperatives. This is one version. of the categorical imperative. So when you think about now Kant's formula of humanity, when you think about what is right or wrong, this is a way to think about it, right? Am I using people, right? Even if I'm getting the right, getting good consequences, quote unquote good consequences. Motives, intention matter. That's the highlight of this formula of humanity. Now, this is another version of the categorical imperative, and this is the principle of universal law, or the universal law formulation. And this this will kind of highlight the kind of reason or rational way to kind of come to know or figure out what is morally right or wrong. So the principle of ends, what we just talked about, stresses how all persons have equal moral value, right? Now, what we're going to do, though, is this idea of universalizability in duties. So the universal law act only in accordance with a maxim that you can at the same time rationally will to hold as a universal moral law. So that's a mouthful. So we're going to get to understand that, but we're going to break down what is a maxim, first of all. A maxim is just a rule of conduct or moral behavior, right? Think of it like, should I steal? No, you shouldn't steal, right? You should not steal is a maxim, a rule of conduct. Now, what Kant's principle requires that any moral law makes perfect sense when made into it to hold it universally. So what he's going to do is he's going to say, if there's a maxim that makes sense, that is moral, that means you can make it universal. That is, you should be able to apply this rule for everyone, no exceptions, and you don't make an exception for yourself. So here's kind of like a test. Let's say action A, right, is like, murdering someone wrong, right? So if I identify, murdering is wrong, the maxim, right? Or is murdering wrong, like, I should murder, or I should not murder. Let's start with that. I should not murder. Could this be a universal law? Could everyone follow I should not murder? Yeah, right? Everyone could follow that. There's like no problem, right? Now, the thing is, if you can't, then it's unjust. If it cannot be universalizable, then it's unjust. If it can be universalizable, then it is the right thing to do. Now, if it's not, then it's unjust. Okay, well, if yes, right? If it is universalizable, then you also have to ask the further, could I will it to be universal law? That is, can it be practical? If not, then it's immoral. If it is, then it's permissible. Okay, you're thinking, that was hard, too abstract. Let me give you some examples. Okay. Should I steal? So the maxim, the moral rule or code is steal, or command, right? Or I should steal. You have to ask, could this be a universal law? What if everyone went around stealing? And the thing is, you can't. And this is Kant. Kant brings this to light. It's really cool. Let's think about stealing, right? What if everyone stole? If everyone stole, then what would happen is that there would be no such thing as stealing. Why? Because there would be no such thing as private property. The only way you can steal something is if you own it, right? If you have private property. But if I stole Jane's watch and Jane stole, Jack's watch, and then, Jack stole my watch, well, then that was Jane's watch. What would eventually happen? What if everyone stole? Then what would happen is we would lose the sense of personal property. So what would happen? There would be no such thing as stealing. And so what happens is it's what I call kind of a conceptual contradiction. If you tried to steal and made it universal, then the concept of stealing would go away. What does that show? If that happens, that's immoral. That's showing that stealing, whatever the thing is, it's a thing that cannot be universalized, and therefore that's immoral. This is a test, a way to figure out if something is moral or immoral. If that was hard or difficult, go back and listen to it again. Okay, I'll also post some other videos that may teach this at a different angle or similar angle, but different teacher, so you may get that help as well. Okay, another kind of contradiction. What if I thought of a lying promise, right? So this is kind of Kant's example. When I believe myself to be in need of money, I shall borrow money and promise to repay it, even though I know that this will never happen. So I make a lying promise. I promise I'll pay you back, John, but you know what? I know in my heart that I'm not. Now, what if you're now thinking, is this moral or immoral? Now you think, well, what if everyone, that is, you universalize it, when he or believes herself or himself to be in need, could promise whatever he or she pleases with the intention of not keeping it? What if now there's a contradiction? That is, you can't consistently both make a maxim. What would happen if we make a lying promise? Would people believe you after a while? No. Would they let you borrow money? No. Why? Because everyone would be making a lying promise. So the very reason why you make a lying promise is so that you can promise but then not keep it, right? But if everyone did that, then no one would be able to do that. So that is a kind of contradiction. Okay, let's keep going. Here's another example. And this is slightly different. This is the concept of indifference, right? So this is the idea of, I'll read his quote first. Let each be as happy as heaven wills, or as he can make himself. I will not take anything from him or even envy him. Only I do not want to contribute to his welfare or to his assistance in distress. That is, you know what? Like, what about being a hermit? As long as I'm going to be a hermit, but I don't have to help you. You don't have to help me. Like, I just want to do my thing, but don't pressure me to help you, and you don't have to help me. And he thinks that this would lead to what I will call like a practical contradiction, or you can't, what he will say, you can't will it to be true. So here's what the quote says: a will that resolved on this would conflict with itself, since the case would sometimes arise in which he needs the love and sympathetic participation of others, and where through such a natural law arising from his own own will, he would rob himself of all hope of assistance that he wishes for himself. So, in living in Wisconsin, in going through a winter, in your life, there will be at least one time where you will need the help of a stranger, right? If you resolved yourself and said, no, you take this indifference approach, no, you know what? It's kind of practically impossible at some point in time that you will need help from somebody, right? And that's why I think that's a kind of contradiction. Okay, so there are two different kinds of contradictions. Some that are constituted that, the maxim cannot be even thought without contradiction as a universal law, and that's the lying example, that's the stealing example, what I call a conceptual contradiction. That is, the minute you make it universal, like the concept of it goes away. The other kind is where it says, he calls it impossible to will that their maxim be raised to the universality of a law of nature, because such a will would contradict itself. That is, this is the indifference app. It's a practical contradiction. Come on, seriously. You cannot in your whole life be indifferent to other people without it being practically impossible, right? So those are kind of two kinds of contradictions. Now let's kind of talk about some criticisms. These are from your book. One is what the consequentialists will say. They'll say, look, are you saying that consequences are not relevant? Your theory does not take any consequences into account, but consequences are relevant. Kant's reply, well, come on. None of us can control another person's actions or the future events. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We can't. They're too much out of control, out of our hands completely. We only have control of our intentions and motives and what we do and what we choose. So shouldn't morality be based on that, not something that we cannot predict? Okay, that's the idea of at least Kant's reply to this criticism. Another criticism is the absolutism objection, and this idea is like, look, if a moral principle, a categorical imperative, if it's absolutely the case, then you have to do it, right? But what if you are in a moral dilemma where two or more principles conflict, right? You save, if you do action A, you save your husband, but as a result 5 people die, or you do action B and you save 5 people, but as a result your husband dies. Well, what's the right thing to do, right? That's a moral dilemma, right? In this case, Kant would have to say there is a right answer to this. But you know what? That's hard, right? Or the case of the, Nazis come to your door. Do you lie when they ask, are you hiding Jews? Or do you save their lives, right? There's a dilemma, a conflict of two things that are morally right to do. Now, if you remember Ross's view, you can kind of order them in a way so that it will make sense. But Kant's view seems absolutistic, right? So that's a criticism that people have brought. Here are some criticisms that are in the book, but I'm kind of, talking about it in my own way. Okay, one is that it's too weak. Kant's theory sometimes is too weak. That is, sometimes it allows too much. What do you mean? It allows actions that should not be allowed. So here is a maxim. So if you're clever enough, you can kind of, I found some loopholes, right? So here's maxim 1. Lie to those who are too stupid to realize it whenever you can make money by doing so. Okay. Notice, what if I universalize this? Made this that everyone can do it. Could I still do it? Yeah. Why? Because I would just pick out the people who are too stupid to realize it, right? Notice the way I phrase this maxim, it focuses on a certain group of people and won't apply to everyone, right? So then this becomes a moral thing. However, this is immoral. That is, it allows, so sometimes the loophole is that Kant's theory can include things that are immoral, but it passes his test. Another similar kind of example, rape, pillage, and plunder as long as you are teaching Intro to Philosophy at Madison College, right? I happen to be one of these people, and there are probably a total of 5 or 6 people who are teaching Intro to Philosophy, right? If we universalize this, what happens is that it picks out only those 5 people, and it would say, is it universalizable? Yes. If it is, then it's moral, right? However, this is immoral, so it seems that we found a loophole for the universal law formulation. Okay. All right. The other kind of criticism is that it's too strong at times, that it prohibits too much. So that is, actions that should be allowed seem to be immoral in Kant's, according to Kant's universal law formulation. So I'm from Los Angeles. So the Lakers, they play at the Staples Center, and if you know anything about Los Angeles, there are a lot of cars. And so what happens is that a lot of people, like during the fourth quarter, will leave the game early, right, to beat the traffic. Because if you stay the whole time, then you'll be jammed in the parking garage, and it'll take you forever to get home. So let's say, I'm wondering if that's moral. So I'm leave the Lakers game at the Staples Center early to beat the traffic. Notice though, what if this was universalizable? That is, if we universalize it, if it applied to everyone, what if everyone did this? Right? What would happen? If everyone left the game early, that means there would be traffic, right? So I wouldn't be able to do the very thing I was trying to do. And so that would make this, if you universalize it, can you universalize it? No. That means this is morally wrong. Leaving the Lakers game is morally wrong. But obviously, leaving the Lakers game early is not morally wrong. So it's prohibiting too much. It's prohibiting something. It's another loophole, if you're clever enough, right? It's another loophole that we found to show something is immoral when it shouldn't be. This is another kind of idea, eat at McDonald's every day. Similar idea. That doesn't, maybe some of you may think that's disgusting, but it's not immoral. Well, unless you say, well, where they get their meat and blah, blah, blah is immoral. Okay, let's set that issue aside. But if you say eating McDonald's every day is not immoral. However, what if we universalize that principle, everyone ate at McDonald's for lunch, right? What would happen is that you wouldn't be able to eat McDonald's every day because the line would be so long, or they would sell out food, or blah, 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 right? So, but obviously that wouldn't, so it would be immoral according to the universal law formulation. However, it is not immoral. So the idea is the categorical imperative seems to have a loophole. Now, having said and given these criticisms, does that make his theory wrong? No. When you're thinking about what he brought up, is you should think about motives and intentions. You should think about universalizability, right? These things are things you should think about. I'm just kind of bringing out that kind of the philosophical. I'm trying to train you to think of how theories work and how theories have challenges. Okay. All right. I'll see you next time. Bye.